To the ladies of Ripley County, hello. As I sit here in my living room in Noblesville, I confess I'm sorry to miss the opportunity to meet you in person. But I hope that together we can still find some joy in what may seem like an improbable scenario. My name is Sarah Radican, and I'm here to tell you that the key to finding and holding on to hope is happiness. And happiness will give us the courage to keep going through even the most difficult days. Because deep down, happiness is courage. Now, other things can give us courage too. Being freaked out can provide a surge of adrenaline to help us lift a car off of somebody. And sometimes, getting angry can feel like it gives us the boost that we need to deal with truly terrible situations. But happiness is a source of courage too, and it won't leave us with an adrenaline hangover. I am sure that many of you are still navigating this uncertain territory we find ourselves in. Routines have certainly been disrupted. Family celebrations and observations are on hold. In my family, we were supposed to be celebrating my daughter's wedding in a couple of weeks. And my godson's high school graduation will come in an envelope, not an auditorium. And many of you are facing similar disruptions and interruptions in cherished and important rites of passage. We've all had to change plans, be flexible, and be gracious with both each other and ourselves as we grapple with the frustration and, let's be honest, the grief of missing these momentous occasions. Now, when I was first asked to come speak with you, I was thinking about the common experiences we could draw on as we take our journey towards finding that perfect vision of hope. And then I did some research on what the Ripley County Community Foundation does, and wow, I was stunned to have the opportunity to meet such amazing women with decades of incredible commitment and service to your community. And that tells me that you are no strangers to hope and the power it has to change lives. Now, I wish that this quarantine was the first time in my life that I had faced a major disruption, but it is not. The year I turned 30 was when I first learned what isolation could really feel like. That year, my now ex-husband was convicted and went to prison. And I found myself a single mom with no real job skills and 4 little kids in an emotional crisis, and in-laws who were pretty toxic about the whole situation. And because I hadn't yet learned not to ask how much worse it could get, that year I was also diagnosed with cancer. A couple of months later, my youngest child, who was 2 at the time, had to have emergency surgery to remove an infection from her skull. One of my brothers was in a terrible car accident that left him in a coma and eventually killed him. My car was repossessed, my house flooded, and I found my first gray hair. Now, looking back, in all honesty, that gray hair thing seems a little silly, but in the moment, that was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. And I was convinced that it was the ultimate sign from the universe that I was just not going to be happy again, ever again, and that hope was something for other people, but certainly not for me. But remember those 4 kids? Well, they needed me, and I had to figure out a way to get out of bed every day and do what I needed to do. And I will be honest with you, there were days when that seemed completely impossible. But my grandmother, God rest her soul, she was one of the smartest and wisest people I have ever known. And she always said that no matter how bad things get, you just have to hang on, because nothing lasts forever. And so I knew that I needed to figure out how to keep going on those days when life was a series of gut punches. Now, people don't know what to say when bad things happen, right? And if I had $1 for every time somebody would just shake their head and tell me, just look for the silver lining, sugar. Ugh. I really dislike that phrase, and I don't know what silver lining there is in these really difficult experiences, like the one we find ourselves in now. And I didn't even want a silver lining. I certainly didn't need a silver lining. What I needed was hope, because that's a real building block for personal emotional resilience. Because if we think there's a chance, if we have any hope at all, we're willing to hang on and keep going. And I knew that I just needed to find something small but positive to convince myself that maybe tomorrow would be better. So I started looking for something good, something little but good in every day. And I have to tell you, at first, it felt ridiculous. Because you see, I had become an expert at looking for the bad. I told myself that I just got smart about watching for all the bad stuff that could happen. Then I would be ready for it when it did. It's kind of like watching every episode of the news just in case there's something actually important on the 14th retelling. So spoiler, that doesn't actually help. It just keeps us stressed and miserable because our brains are actually designed to keep on high alert for danger. So it latches on to every suggestion that there's something dangerous and horrible around us. And that's how we survive as a species. But here's the thing. Yes, there are lots of dangers all around us. And there are also an enormous amount of beautiful and good and happy things out there for us too. And the trick is we have to learn to look for both. Now, earlier I told you that happiness is courage. And when we talk about happiness, a lot of people immediately think about things like those graduations or weddings or winning the lottery, really big stuff. My dad calls these peak experiences. He's a psychologist and they have a term for everything. But these peak experiences do usually come with a lot of really good emotion, really positive stuff, but it's not sustainable. Because even if those experiences could be repeated every single day, the effect would eventually level off. It's like if you get to go fishing every day, it's just not that fun after a while. So when I talk about happiness and when positive psychologists talk about happiness, what we're really describing is your general state of being in the moment. And so if I were to ask you to tell me right now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, I dislike everything about my life right now, and 10 being, everything is amazing, this is a peak experience, where are you right now? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. But science tells us that the best place to hang out on average on that scale is a 6 or an 8. So if you're there right now, awesome, you're on track. And if you're not there, or when you find yourself somewhere lower on the scale at times in the future, I have some ideas for you, because when you tell me that your happiness score is a 2 or a 3, that just tells me that there's a big gap between what's going on in your life and what feeds your soul, and that's okay. But you can raise your happiness score. So I've got 3 ideas for you to think about. First, you have to believe that you matter. I believe that you matter, and you have to believe that too. And it has a couple of distinct pieces. You have to matter to yourself. You have to be content with your life. Are you? Are you content with your life? And are you living your life intentionally, or just letting it happen to you? To the best of your ability, are you adding value to your own life in some way? And most importantly, are you taking care of yourself? Self-care is incredibly important, and women especially struggle with this, particularly in times of crisis. So here's another one of my grandmother's sayings. You can't pour somebody else a cup of coffee from an empty pot. It's a choice that you have each and every day to know who you are and be content with and honor that person, even as you work to become a better version tomorrow. And you have to recognize that you matter in other people's lives too. And obviously, this organization has made tremendous impact on your communities and the people who live there. But organizations are really just a place where people come together for a common purpose. And this purpose, your purpose, it's transformational. I think you know that, but it's good to pause every so often and just glance back, especially when things seem maybe not so great, and remind ourselves of those beautiful, powerful moments of grace. You are all bright lights and a valuable part of so many lives, shining like a beacon of hope in uncertain times. Hang on to that. Now, next, I want to talk about gratitude. I was telling you earlier about my personal aha moment, where I found that if I could locate small things to be grateful for or small moments of happiness to savor, it was enough to fuel that little flame of hope deep in my soul. Now, I intensely dislike the silver lining concept because I don't think you can just magically flip a crummy experience into a shiny, beautiful thing, just like that. So instead, I started calling these little moments of joy my silver threads, because I figured I could collect enough of them eventually and empower myself to weave my own silver lining. And what happened, accidentally, was that my brain started getting really good at seeking out happiness all on its own. It's funny, I actually started a good habit accidentally. Now, life certainly will still throw us curveballs. My kids have been in car accidents and spent time in a war zone. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I've lost loved ones. I've even found more gray hair. But I know that despite those very real parts of being human, there are incredibly beautiful things all around us too. And so I look for them and I write them down, because that lets me get even more happiness out of the same experience. I get to enjoy the good thing while it's happening. And then when I write it down in my journal, my brain gets a little boost of those feel happy chemicals, because our brains don't really distinguish between an experience and a memory of the experience. And pro tip, if you want to squeeze even more goodness out of that moment, tell a friend. You see, they'll get a boost too, as their mind imagines the amazing thing you're telling them about, and you get the added benefit of strengthening those social connections, something we can all use a lot more of. Now, speaking of savoring, are you making time to appreciate those moments of good that you find? Or are you rushing through your day trying to be as productive as humanly possible? I see you. You are high-performing women who make things happen. And maybe you've seen that meme going around that suggests that if you don't come out of this having learned a new language and mastered a new skill and started a new business, then you're just not that committed. Well, that's completely untrue and unrealistic. It is absurd to expect that people can work, take care of their families, homeschool their children, manage their own emotional response to a completely unfamiliar situation, and publish academic research and learn to make sourdough and knit and speak Bulgarian or whatever. And the value of a person is not measured by how busy we are. And when we race from A to B to C, D, E, F, G, and we don't pause to appreciate any of those experiences along the way, what's the point of the race in the first place? Give yourself permission to pause and simply breathe. And I know what you're thinking. I'm already breathing, Sarah. Well, I know, but what I'm talking about is deep, intentional breathing. Some people make an entire career out of this. And there are about 1 million videos on YouTube that can walk you through lots of different ways to engage with your own breath as an opportunity to relax, decompress, and recharge. So when you're ready, you can get back to whatever you were doing. There is a ton of data supporting the benefit of mindful breathing practices and how it decreases cortisol, the stress hormone. So I invite you to pause right now and take a deep breath. And then hold it for just a couple of heartbeats. And then exhale fully. This is a simple, easy trick you can use when you find yourself overwhelmed or frazzled or just stressed out. So ladies, thank you for all that you do year-round in making our communities stronger, healthier, and places where hope shines brightly.